Introduction. Friends, if you're looking for a thrilling roller coaster ride packed with suspense and survival drama, then you've got to check out the movie Extortion, 2017. And if you're new to our channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss exciting updates like this one. In today's video, we're diving into everything you need to know about Extortion, a gripping tale that will keep you on the edge of your seat from start to finish. We'll talk about what makes this movie such a nail-biter, where you can watch it, and all the behind-the-scenes magic that brought this intense story to life. I'll be telling you which OTT platform or satellite channel is currently streaming this movie, along with a deep dive into the film's production, pre-production insights, filming locations, post-production details, and even the budget and box office performance. We won't stop there. I'll also give you a spoiler-free overview of the story, a short review, and break down the performances of the cast, who played what role, and how each character adds to the heart-pounding tension. Plus, we'll uncover some lesser-known facts about the film that fans will absolutely love. So buckle up and watch this video till the end, because there's a lot to unpack about Extortion, a movie that proves just how far one man will go to save his family. Let's get started. Alright friends, buckle up, because the story of Extortion, 2017, doesn't just walk you through a typical thriller plot. It grabs you by the collar and throws you headfirst into a nerve-wracking survival nightmare in paradise gone wrong fashion. We kick things off with what looks like your classic tropical family vacation. Kevin Riley, a dedicated doctor and all-around good guy, decides to take his wife Julie and their young son Max on an exotic getaway to the beautiful Bahamas. Cue the crystal-clear water, golden sunshine, family laughs, and postcard-perfect views. It's all smiles, until it's not. Here's where the gears shift. Kevin, being the adventurous type, rents a rickety little boat to explore an uninhabited island. Seems harmless, right? A little Robinson Crusoe fantasy? Wrong. The boat breaks down. No signal. No food. No fresh water. Stranded. Isolated. Panic starts to creep in, and you feel it. This isn't just a vacation gone wrong. It's a ticking time bomb of desperation. The narrative unfolds in a linear fashion. No time jumps, no perspective shifts, just a relentless, real-time plunge into the abyss. And that's what makes it so gripping. You're stuck out there with Kevin. You feel the sunburn, the dehydration, the gnawing fear of watching your loved ones slowly fade right in front of you. Enter Miguel Caba. He's not your average villain. He's charming, sure, but he's also dangerous and cunning. When Kevin finally flags down a passing fisherman, Miguel, you think, yes, finally salvation. Oh, how wrong we are. Miguel sees an opportunity and demands a ransom. That's right. He's not here to save them. He's here to cash in. And this, friends, is the first big gut punch of the story. From here on, Extortion becomes a high-stakes game of survival and betrayal. Kevin manages to escape, gets back to civilization, but the authorities? They don't buy his story. No proof. No evidence. Just a desperate man screaming about a kidnapped family. The conflict shifts from man versus nature to man versus society, and that's a bold switch-up that keeps the tension boiling. As Kevin races against time to find his family, he goes full throttle into action mode. This guy turns from tourist dad to full-blown action hero, fueled by pure adrenaline and fatherly rage. He's sneaking into warehouses, breaking into homes, confronting criminals, all while being hunted by the police. The stakes get higher with every minute, and the emotional pressure is immense. Key turning points come hard and fast. Kevin's narrow escapes. The discovery of Miguel's true nature. The moment he finally convinces someone to believe him. Each scene adds another layer of urgency, testing just how far a man will go when he's got nothing left to lose but the people he loves most. Thematically, Extortion is all about moral limits. What would you do to save your family? Would you beg? Steal? Kill? The film doesn't ask politely, it forces the question down your throat and dares you to answer. And Kevin, oh Kevin, he walks that razor's edge between right and wrong, justice and vengeance, desperation and determination. And just when you think the movie might let you catch your breath, it doesn't. It keeps twisting the knife until the very end, where everything Kevin has fought for comes to a head in a climax that's raw, intense, and emotionally charged. So no, Extortion doesn't mess around with non-linear storytelling or fancy timelines. It doesn't need to. The power is in the moment-to-moment suspense, in the dread of watching a paradise morph into a personal hell, and in the painful choices a father is forced to make in the name of love. It's a story that's simple on paper but executed with such relentless tension and emotional heat that you're hooked all the way through. Alright friends, let's talk characters, because Extortion, 2017, doesn't just drop a few people on a stranded island and call it a day. Nope, it throws them into a pressure cooker and cranks the heat until their true selves boil to the surface. Let's start with Kevin Riley, our lead. Now at first glance, he's the classic nice guy, dad, successful, loving, maybe a little too confident in his boating skills. He's not built like an action hero, doesn't have any secret military background or a hidden past. He's just a regular man trying to give his family a good vacation. But when things start going south, like really south, you see something crack open inside him. His arc is a total transformation from calm, composed family man to a desperate, relentless survivor. Kevin's growth is what gives this movie its emotional punch. In the beginning, he's optimistic, patient, and trusting. He even believes the authorities will help him when he first escapes. But as he's let down again and again, you watch him shed every layer of naivety. The man who wouldn't hurt a fly becomes the man who's ready to destroy anything standing between him and his family. His choices get darker. His actions more aggressive. And yet, you never stop rooting for him because every step he takes comes from a place of raw, undeniable love. He's not trying to be a hero. He's trying to be a father. Now let's talk about Miguel Caba. Oh, Miguel. He is not your mustache-twirling villain. He's not shouting or snarling or breaking stuff for fun. He's quiet, charismatic, calculating. And that's what makes him terrifying. He doesn't see Kevin's family as human beings. He sees them as leverage, as currency. Miguel doesn't evolve much during the story, but that's the point. He's the constant threat, the cold reality Kevin is fighting against. He represents the darkest kind of opportunism, the kind that wears a smile while it holds a knife. Then there's Julie Riley, Kevin's wife. Now, while her screen time is limited, since she spends much of the story as a hostage, her presence looms large. She's not just there for emotional stakes, she's the emotional anchor. The moments we get with her are filled with strength, fear, and hope. She's not just sitting around waiting to be rescued, she's protecting her son, staying alive, staying strong, and that unspoken resilience adds weight to Kevin's mission. He's not saving a damsel in distress, he's racing to save the strongest parts of his life. Max the little boy is more than just the cute kid in danger trope. His vulnerability adds urgency to everything. One moment of silence from him, one tired whimper, and your heart jumps. He doesn't need to say much. His presence alone raises the stakes by tenfold. He's the future Kevin's fighting for. And let's not forget the side characters. The skeptical cops, the unhelpful authorities, the people who just can't wrap their heads around Kevin's wild story. They don't get big arcs, but they serve a purpose. They force Kevin to act alone. They're the societal walls closing in, the proof that sometimes help isn't coming, and if you want justice, you'll have to crawl through fire to get it. So what's the big picture? Every character in Extortion either changes or reveals their true nature under pressure. Kevin evolves through pain. Julie holds the emotional line. Miguel stays unmoved, a storm of greed in human form. It's this collision of desperate love and cold-hearted survival that fuels the story. The relationships are real, raw, and high stakes. You don't just watch them, you feel them unravel and tighten like a noose as the story drags everyone closer to the edge. It's character development in overdrive, wrapped inside a thriller that never gives you time to breathe. And that's exactly why it hits so hard. Alright folks, now let's talk about the beating heart of Extortion, 2017. The performances. Because let's be honest, a story this intense doesn't work unless the actors show up and deliver. And oh boy, they do more than deliver. They go all in. First up, Eion Bailey as Kevin Riley. This guy carries the movie like a man dragging a boat through a hurricane, sweating, struggling, refusing to let go. From the moment we meet Kevin, Bailey gives him this calm, dad-next-door charm. He's soft-spoken, loving, maybe even a little too trusting. But once the nightmare kicks off, boom. Bailey flips the switch and unleashes a raw, frantic energy that doesn't let up. You can practically feel the salt water burning his skin, the fear tightening in his chest, the fire in his eyes as he chases down every last clue to find his family. And what makes his performance so gripping? It's not that he becomes a superhero. No, Bailey stays human. He's exhausted. He makes mistakes. He panics. But he never stops. Every desperate sprint, every confrontation, every emotional breakdown, you believe it because Bailey makes you believe it. He doesn't act like a man in trouble. He is that man. Now let's talk about the scene stealer, Barkhad Abdi as Miguel Caba. Remember this name because this man plays calmly menacing better than most. You might remember him from Captain Phillips where he made "I'm the captain now" iconic. In Extortion, he dials it down and lets the menace simmer just below the surface. He's not shouting threats, he's laying them out like business deals. He's smooth, calculated, and every word he says makes your skin crawl just a little. Abdi's performance adds this weird layer of twisted logic to Miguel. He doesn't see himself as a villain, just a man trying to get what he thinks he deserves. And that's what makes him so unsettling. He's not wild or out of control, he's patient, calm, and deadly. Every scene he's in has this quiet intensity, like he might smile at you 1 second and pull a gun the next. That kind of unpredictability? That's acting gold. Bethany Joy Lenz as Julie Riley brings a whole different kind of strength to the screen. Sure, she spends part of the movie in danger, but she never plays the victim. She's fierce, grounded, and emotionally sharp. Even in silence, she speaks volumes. Her fear, her determination, her will to protect her son. Lenz gives the character real emotional weight. You feel like she's someone who has endured, not just survived. And that makes Kevin's mission to save her all the more powerful. The supporting cast? They may not get as much screen time, but they do their jobs with precision. The skeptical cops, the officials who just don't believe Kevin's wild story, the bystanders who do nothing. All of them add layers to the frustration and realism of Kevin's world. They aren't just obstacles, they're part of the system he's fighting against. Every actor in this film understands the assignment. Make it real. Make the stakes matter. And that's what happens here. Nobody's phoning it in. Nobody's just playing a role. These performances punch through the screen and pull you into the chaos, the fear, the desperation, and the hope. They're the reason Extortion hits like a storm, because behind every plot twist and dramatic moment, there's an actor pouring everything into it. Now let's dive into the brain behind the madness. Phil Volken, the director of Extortion. And let me tell you, this man doesn't just direct the film, he orchestrates it like a suspense symphony. From the first wide shot of turquoise waters to the last pulse-pounding moment, you can feel his grip on every frame, tight, purposeful, and completely unrelenting. First off, the tone. Volken starts with sunshine and smiles, he lures you in. It's tropical, it's warm, it's beautiful. You're practically smelling the sunscreen through the screen. But just as you're getting comfortable, bam, he slams the door on paradise and locks you in a survival thriller. The shift in tone isn't jarring, it's expertly creeped in. The color palette dulls subtly. The waves feel less inviting and more ominous. That same sunlight becomes harsh and unkind. He transforms a vacation dreamscape into a sun-drenched nightmare, and you don't even realize it's happening until your jaw's already clenched. Volken keeps the mood taut and merciless. There's no room to breathe because even in the quiet scenes, he's using silence like a weapon. He lets the camera linger just long enough to make you sweat. When Kevin's stranded with his family, there's no dramatic music or fast cuts. It's just them, the sun, the water, and time dragging. You feel the desperation growing like a sunburn. That's how he builds dread, by making you sit in it. Now let's talk pacing. This movie doesn't waste time. It doesn't sprint either. It tightens. It's like a rope slowly pulling taut around your chest. The first act sets the stakes, the second spirals into chaos, and the third becomes a relentless chase. Volken knows exactly when to slow things down to let emotion land, and exactly when to light the fuse. The moments when Kevin is doubted, when he's running out of options, Volken milks those for every drop of tension. Stylistically, there's nothing flashy here, and that's the genius of it. No filters, no gimmicks, no shaky cam nonsense. Just clean, confident shot composition. He lets the environment do the talking. The open sea becomes a character, the island becomes a prison, and every frame feels like it's closing in. When Kevin is alone on the boat, the wide shots make him feel tiny. When he's desperate and determined, the camera comes in close. So close you can practically feel the sweat on his brow and the pounding in his chest. But here's the real trick. Volken lets emotion drive the camera. It's not just where the camera is, it's where it feels like it should be. During chase scenes, the camera stays low and intimate like you're running right behind Kevin. During Miguel's tense negotiations, it holds steady, letting his quiet menace fill the space. It's not about what's flashy, it's about what keeps you locked in. And narrative vision? Volken doesn't just tell a story, he traps you in it. There's no omniscient God's eye view. You know only what Kevin knows. You feel what he feels. You get no breaks, no cheats, no shortcuts. It's a survival story told from inside the survival. You're not watching from the outside, you're clinging to the raft right there with him. Every stylistic choice Volken makes is in service of immersion. No wink at the camera, no unnecessary flair. Just pure, sweaty, sunburned, high-stakes storytelling. He turns a simple plot into a gut-wrenching ordeal by controlling mood, rhythm, and visual pressure with surgical precision. You don't just see the danger. Under Volken's direction, you live it. Alright, grab your imaginary camera, friends. because we're zooming in on one of the unsung heroes of Extortion, 2017, the cinematography. And let me tell you, this film doesn't just look good. It tells its story through the lens like a visual survival guide, blending paradise with paranoia until you don't know whether to admire the view or scream into it. First things first, this movie is a masterclass in contrast. The film opens with breathtaking aerial shots of the Bahamas, crystal clear water, lush green islands, golden sunlight bathing everything like a screensaver. You almost want to pause and book a flight. But this beauty isn't just here to impress your eyes, it's here to set you up. Because once things go wrong, the camera turns that same paradise into a shimmering, inescapable prison. The framing? Absolutely deliberate. When Kevin and his family are on the island, the camera pulls wide, isolating them in massive, open landscapes. It screams, look how small they are. Look how far they are from help. There's one particular shot, Kevin dragging his near-lifeless family across the shore, heat waves rippling, no one around for miles. It's brutal, it's beautiful, and it hurts. That kind of framing hits harder than any monologue ever could. Now let's talk camera angles, because this film knows how to play with perspective. When Kevin is vulnerable, lying in a boat, begging for help, confronting police, the camera often looks down on him. It shrinks him. He's powerless, and the angle tells you that without a single word. But flip to the moments when he finally takes control, when he fights back, when he gets desperate enough to go rogue, the camera rises with him. Close-ups tighten. The angle lifts. It's not just a change in action, it's a change in who he is. And the camera makes sure you feel it. Lighting deserves its own round of applause. The movie doesn't rely on artificial shadows or dark rooms for suspense. It uses sunlight as a weapon. Harsh, overexposed midday light makes the island scenes feel hostile. There's no relief, no shade, no escape. The sun is punishing. It washes everything out until even the ocean seems like it's mocking you. And at night? Oh, things go from sunburn to shadow real fast. The lighting gets tighter, colder, more urgent. You start watching corners, scanning the darkness. You feel the change in temperature, not because someone says it's cold, but because the light itself tells you so. Now for the visually striking moments, and there are plenty. There's a haunting shot of Kevin drifting on the broken boat, his body slumped, the sky above him a blazing white void. He looks like a man who's been erased by nature. Then there's the water shots, underwater, over the shoulder, tracking his movements with a ghost-like stillness. It's not flashy, but it's mesmerizing. And when Miguel shows up, the mood changes with the camera. He's often framed dead center, eyes locked with Kevin's. There's no escape from his presence, and the camera doesn't let you look away. Tension isn't created by music or words alone. It's in those silent, steady frames that say, something bad is about to happen, and you're stuck here watching it. Even in action scenes, Extortion resists the urge to go chaotic. No shaky cam nonsense. The cinematography stays controlled, like the lens itself is holding its breath. Whether Kevin is running through alleyways or sneaking onto a boat, the camera never loses him, and that keeps you locked in too. So yeah, the cinematography here doesn't just paint a pretty picture. It traps you in it. It whispers, it shouts, it stares. It turns sunlight into suspense and wide open water into suffocating dread. And every frame, every angle, every flicker of light pushes the story deeper under your skin. Alright friends, grab your seatbelts and hold on tight, because the editing and pacing of Extortion, 2017, aren't just here to move the story along, they're here to mess with your heartbeat. Seriously, this movie doesn't just have a flow, it has a pulse. A rhythm that speeds up, slows down, and throws you around like a raft in a storm. Let's talk about the editing first. Right from the beginning, the transitions are clean, smart, and invisible. You don't see the cuts, you feel the shifts. That's how good editing works. It doesn't wave its hands in your face, it glides. One moment you're soaking in a perfect family vacation, the next you're stranded on a deserted island, and you don't even notice the transition until you're already knee-deep in tension. The film doesn't chop scenes to bits or try to be overly clever with timelines. It keeps the momentum focused like a guided missile. But don't think it's predictable. Oh no. What makes this film exciting is how the rhythm plays with your expectations. There are stretches where everything slows down, long takes, extended silences, drawn-out tension. And you start thinking, okay, maybe we're catching our breath. Wrong. That slow burn? It's the fuse. And when it hits the powder keg, boom, suddenly you're in a chase, a confrontation, a breakdown. The tempo flips and now you're scrambling to keep up. This back and forth pacing is intentional. It mirrors Kevin's emotional roller coaster. One minute he's hopeful, the next he's broken. One minute he's explaining his story to a police officer, the next he's running for his life. The editing cuts don't just move the plot, they match the character's state of mind. Fast cuts during panic. Steady, deliberate edits during despair. It's emotional editing, not just functional editing. There's a brilliant sequence early on, Kevin desperately trying to flag down a boat while his family is slipping into heatstroke. The editing here stretches time like taffy. Every second feels eternal. The shots cut between Kevin's frenzied waving, the boat passing by, and his son unconscious on the sand. The timing of those cuts makes you want to scream at the screen. That's not just storytelling, that's emotional manipulation, and it works. And oh, the timing of reveals. The film knows exactly when to show you something and when to hold it back. Whether it's a twist of betrayal, a moment of escape, or a painful truth, the pacing builds to each reveal with the precision of a ticking clock. The editors didn't just piece this story together, they designed it to keep you dangling over the edge. Even the quieter scenes, the ones with no action, no shouting, just tension simmering under the surface, are carefully timed. Conversations don't drag. Pauses are placed with intention. You feel the weight of silence, the discomfort of hesitation. The movie knows that suspense isn't always about speed, it's about pressure. And that pressure builds thanks to editing that knows when to push and when to pull. Now, are there any pacing hiccups? Maybe one or two scenes stretch their legs a little more than needed. Like the middle act where Kevin's running around trying to explain his situation. But even those moments serve a purpose. They let you sit with his hopelessness. They make you feel how exhausting it is to not be believed. And just when you're starting to feel that weight, boom, a new lead, a new chase, a new spike in your pulse. So if you're wondering whether Extortion keeps you engaged, the answer is yes and then some. The editing doesn't just guide the film, it drives it like a getaway car. The pacing doesn't just move the story, it shapes the emotional experience. Whether you're sweating from tension, holding your breath in suspense, or clenching your fists in frustration, you're right there in rhythm with every frame. Now let's tune our ears to a part of Extortion, 2017, that sneaks under your skin and plays your nerves like a violin, the soundtrack and score. This isn't one of those movies that slaps a hit song over the credits and calls it a day. Oh no. This film uses music like a psychological weapon. Sometimes whispering, sometimes pounding, always aiming to rattle your spine. Right from the start, the music sets you up like a magician showing you the pretty side of the trick. Tropical tunes, light percussion, maybe a breezy little string or two. It's all sunshine and fruity drinks. But that's just the bait. Because when things go wrong, and boy do they go wrong, the score drops you into emotional freefall. The first thing that stands out is how the music disappears in key moments. Yes, you heard that right. This film uses silence better than many films use full orchestras. Take the scene when Kevin realizes no one's coming to help. There's no dramatic swell, no sad violin. Just the sound of the wind, the water, his breath. The silence screams. That's a bold move, and it works because silence in this film isn't absence, it's pressure. It tells you the world doesn't care. It's not listening. But when the score does kick in, watch out. It's not bombastic or overly orchestral. It's tense, atmospheric, and tightly wound. Think low, thrumming tones that vibrate under scenes like a distant engine that might explode at any moment. It's subtle, but it builds and builds until your nerves are frayed. You don't always notice the music at first, but you feel it. Your heartbeat starts to sync with it. That's how good it is. And there are recurring motifs too. Little melodic phrases that sneak back into the story in twisted forms. The gentle theme that plays during the happy family scenes? It doesn't disappear, it morphs. Later you'll hear echoes of it during the darker moments, warped and slowed down. It's like the music itself is mourning the loss of innocence. It's a brilliant trick that ties the emotional arc together without you even realizing it. There's one especially standout section, the cat and mouse sequence near the third act. The score doesn't just underline the tension, it drives it. It pulses like a heartbeat, quickening as Kevin's desperation spikes. The music and the action are practically dancing. Every footstep, every corner turned, the score reacts like it's alive. But perhaps the most powerful thing about the soundtrack is that it never tries to overshadow the story. This isn't the kind of film where the music begs for your attention. It's the opposite, it serves the story. Like a good supporting actor, it stays in the background until its moment comes. And when it hits those emotional notes, it lands them like a gut punch. The score also does something rare. It enhances both action and emotion. When Kevin's scrambling to survive, the music paces like a predator. When he's crumbling, realizing just how hopeless things are, the score pulls back, lets in the quiet, and lets the moment breathe. The sound design and music work hand in hand, often blurring together so you're not even sure where one ends and the other begins. And again, silence. This movie uses silence the way some thrillers use explosions. It's deafening, uncomfortable, real. The absence of music makes every small sound feel huge. A breath, a rustle, a splash. That's a bold compositional choice, and it gives scenes a raw, visceral power. So if you came for big orchestras and blaring horns, Extortion might surprise you. But if you're into scores that creep, crawl, and clutch your nerves like a vice, you're in for a treat. This soundtrack doesn't just accompany the story, it haunts it. And long after the movie's over, you might still hear its echoes, low, steady, waiting. Okay, time to dive into the deep end. Extortion, 2017, doesn't just play out like a high-stakes thriller. Beneath the surface, there are some heavy themes swimming around, ideas that lurk in the corners of the story waiting to be noticed. The film is more than just a race against time. It's a test of character, a reflection on trust and desperation, and even a look at the dark side of human nature when survival is on the line. Let's start with trust, or more accurately, the fragility of trust. Early in the movie, Kevin and his family are stuck in this beautiful, dreamlike paradise. You think it's all good, right? But then, a moment of crisis turns everything upside down. Kevin reaches out for help. He wants to believe that people are inherently good, that someone will help him. But the world doesn't care about his intentions. His trust in the system is shattered as every person he relies on either betrays him or turns a blind eye. As the story unravels, you realize how trust is earned, not given. When you're out there alone, stranded in the middle of nowhere, it's the cold, hard reality that people aren't always there for you, and that betrayal can come from unexpected places. Then there's the theme of desperation, and how it distorts people. Kevin's journey is a descent into emotional chaos. He's not just fighting against the elements, he's fighting against his own mind. His desperation makes him do things he wouldn't normally do. There's a scene where he has to choose between two dangerous paths, one of survival at the cost of morality, the other where his family's life is still in the balance. What happens when you're pushed to the edge? What's left of your humanity when your back is against the wall? The film doesn't shy away from this, and it leaves you questioning just how far you'd go in Kevin's shoes. Then we come to the human condition. This is a film that doesn't sugarcoat survival. It's raw, it's gritty, and it forces you to face uncomfortable questions. The idea that every action has a consequence runs through the entire narrative. Kevin's journey isn't just about surviving the island. It's about surviving himself. It's about the fight to maintain moral integrity when the world around you starts to crumble. And the more he grapples with his situation, the more the story asks, what kind of person do you become when all your choices lead to darker and darker paths? But let's take a breather for a second and talk about family. This isn't just a traditional fight to save your loved ones kind of plot. It's a test of what family means when survival becomes the ultimate goal. The film explores the psychological weight of responsibility. Kevin isn't just fighting for himself, he's trying to keep his family together. And that responsibility? It becomes a burden. Each moment of potential relief is clouded by the looming question, am I doing the right thing? Kevin's relationship with his wife and son is tested to its limits, and as they face this shared nightmare, the film asks how family dynamics change under pressure. What do you do when the people you love are the very ones holding you back from saving yourself? And, of course, corruption and greed come into play. The darker corners of the story aren't just physical, they're moral. The characters Kevin meets along the way are driven by their own desires, their own agendas. It's a stark look at how personal greed can manipulate and destroy the greater good. You see it in the choices the antagonists make. They're not just obstacles in the story, they're representations of what happens when people become so obsessed with getting ahead that they'll do anything no matter the cost. The film doesn't preach about greed, it simply shows its devastating consequences. Through it all, the film explores the limits of human resilience. How much can a person endure before they break? Kevin's ability to push through the endless obstacles thrown his way is a testament to the lengths someone will go when pushed beyond what seems possible. And yet, the film doesn't sugarcoat it. It doesn't turn Kevin into some superhero. He stumbles, he falters, he makes mistakes. This human vulnerability makes his journey not just believable but relatable. It's the ultimate question. When life strips you down to your core, what do you have left? By the end, the film's message isn't just about the triumph of survival. It's about what happens after survival. What's left when you've endured everything life has thrown at you? The film doesn't wrap things up neatly with a bow. It leaves you with that lingering question. After you've been tested to the edge, can you go back to the life you had before? And more importantly, do you even want to? The themes in Extortion work because they never feel preachy or forced. They flow naturally from the narrative, and they tie into every decision the characters make. There are no easy answers here, just messy, complicated ideas about life, survival, and
Let's
human
get
nature
into
that
the
stick with
visuals
you
of
long after the
Extortion,
credits
2017,
because this is where things get a little bit tricky. We're talking about visual effects and CGI, and the balance the film strikes between the practical and the digital. Spoiler alert, it's a roller coaster, but one where every twist and turn makes you sit up and pay attention. Now, the most important thing to know about the visuals in Extortion is that the filmmakers understand one simple thing. The real world is the best effect. For most of the film, you're immersed in the natural beauty of the Bahamas, sun-drenched beaches, glittering water, and rugged landscapes that don't need a digital touch-up. The practical effects here, like the stunning shots of the sea or the heat-soaked streets, are all about authenticity. You feel like you're actually in the middle of the tension, standing right next to Kevin as he tries to navigate the island. You're there, no tricks needed. But here's where it gets interesting. When things start to go downhill and the stakes rise higher, the visual effects come into play, creeping in like an unexpected twist. Suddenly, the elements of danger, whether it's a boat on the verge of capsizing, a cliffside battle, or moments of extreme peril, start introducing CGI. Now, CGI is often a double-edged sword, right? In some films, it feels like the visual effects are trying to shove their way to the front of the stage, shouting, "Look at me." But not in Extortion. It knows when to use them sparingly. Take the action-packed scenes, where Kevin's desperate efforts push him to make impossible decisions. In those moments, the CGI doesn't steal the show, it enhances it. A small boat struggling against enormous waves? Practical shots combined with digital effects to make the waves feel bigger, the ocean feel like it's suffocating him. It's a subtle blend. The visual effects don't just add cool factor or wow moments like you'd see in a superhero flick. They serve the story, making the environment feel alive, dangerous, and relentless. But not all CGI is created equal. Some digital effects, especially during moments of physical danger, like when characters are in perilous situations or something is blown up, can feel a little off. For instance, there's a moment when a chase sequence feels like it might be straining the boundaries of the CGI budget. The digital explosions or vehicle stunts may look just a tad too polished or too clean. But hey, it's not distracting enough to take you out of the experience. It's a small dip in an otherwise solid approach to blending the real and the digital. However, when the film leans on practical effects, the real explosions, actual physical danger on set, the raw gritty atmosphere, it's where the film truly shines. The moments where Kevin's life hangs in the balance, where a wrong move could mean the difference between survival and catastrophe. That's where you feel the authenticity. There's something visceral about seeing the real ocean spray hit, hearing the crunch of gravel underfoot, or watching an actual explosion rip through the scene. These effects keep you in the moment, making the whole film feel more dangerous and alive. It's like this. CGI should be there to support the story, not overshadow it. And in Extortion, that's exactly what it does. It's never excessive or over the top, but it is effective when it's needed. The filmmakers know how to strike that balance so you don't feel like you're watching a digital wonderland. Instead, it's a movie where everything feels like it could happen. Even if it's exaggerated with a little bit of CGI magic, you never lose the sense of realism. The visual effects might not be the star of the show in Extortion, but they definitely know how to make things pop when necessary. Whether it's the endless ocean, the looming cliffs, or a high-speed boat chase, the film uses digital effects to amplify the stakes, not distract from them. The practical effects, on the other hand, keep the heart of the story grounded, making everything feel gritty and real. Together, they make a potent combo that pulls you in and doesn't let go. Alright, let's take a stroll through the world of Extortion, 2017. But not just any stroll. We're talking about the carefully crafted settings, the locations, the very stage where this tense survival drama unfolds. This is a film that looks like it's real, because, in a lot of ways, it is. First, the locations. The Bahamas might sound like a vacation paradise, but Extortion takes those postcard-perfect beaches and flips them into something far less serene. The wide open ocean isn't a symbol of freedom. It's a vast, threatening space that could swallow you whole. The beaches, once pristine, start to feel like traps. Places where the sunburned beauty of paradise feels more oppressive than relaxing. The world feels alive here, but not in a comforting way. It's as if nature itself is turning against you. And that's a subtle but powerful use of setting. Then we've got the island itself, the perfect blend of rugged and unwelcoming. The filmmakers didn't just choose a tropical paradise for eye candy, they chose it because it serves the story. The jagged rocks, the isolated coves, the murky waters. The geography isn't just a backdrop, it's a character in the story. It's as if the island is closing in on Kevin and his family, slowly squeezing them tighter and tighter. The cliffs looming overhead? Not just a pretty sight, they're constantly reminding us of the precariousness of the situation. One wrong step and it's game over. And don't even get me started on the interiors. The scenes set in the small, cramped cabins or the rough-edged buildings. Those spaces feel like they belong to people who don't have time for luxury. Every corner feels lived in. The props and set design are deliberately sparse but functional. You don't see shiny, polished surfaces or designer furniture. Everything's used, well-worn, and practical. It's a perfect fit for the gritty, survivalist vibe of the film. Every tool, every piece of gear feels like it belongs to someone trying to make do with what's available. These details might be small, but they add so much to the immersive feeling of living this nightmare with Kevin. The boats too. They're not sleek, shiny yachts. They're battered, used, weather-beaten vessels. They're the kind of boats you'd expect to find on an island where life's about survival, not leisure. The filmmakers don't make these boats flashy. They make them a part of the struggle. These boats matter. They carry Kevin's hopes, his desperation, and in some cases, his failures. The mechanics of these boats, the way they creak and strain against the waves, all serve to enhance the tension. The boats aren't just vehicles, they're extensions of the characters themselves, flawed, struggling to keep it together under pressure. Then there's the color palette of the film, which adds to the feeling of unease. The tropical blues and greens of the ocean are beautiful, but they're also strangely sterile, like the calm before the storm. As Kevin's situation worsens, the colors of the island become more washed out, drained, almost lifeless. It's like the place has lost its soul, mirroring Kevin's own descent into desperation. The colors work with the production design to make the setting feel increasingly claustrophobic, as though the beauty of the world is turning into a threatening force. But here's the kicker: the props. The filmmakers didn't just throw in a bunch of random items to fill the frame. Every prop, whether it's a water bottle, a piece of rope, or a map, feels significant. They tell you a little something about the characters. Take the map, seemingly just a tool for navigation, but when it's in Kevin's hands, it represents hope. Every line, every landmark on it is a way out. But as the film goes on, that map becomes something else, a reminder of how lost he is. Every prop becomes a symbol, a small but significant piece of the puzzle. And let's not forget the houses and huts where people take shelter. They're simple structures, worn by time and weather, reflecting the lives of the people who live there. No modern conveniences, no distractions, just survival. It's a stark contrast to the often idealized visions of island life you see in other films. Here there's nothing glamorous about the space. The setting feels authentic, raw, and unpolished. But the true genius lies in how these elements, location, props, set design, all work in harmony with the story. Every setting isn't just a place, it's a test. A test of Kevin's resilience, of his ability to make it through the harsh realities of life. The locations help shape the emotional arc of the film. As Kevin fights to get back to safety, every step, every location he traverses, feels like a battle. The isolation of the island, the cold, imposing landscapes, they push him toward decisions that will determine whether he sinks or swims. In the end, the film's set design and locations aren't just there to look good, they are the story. They speak volumes about the conflict, the struggle, and the character's journey. It's all about immersion, and this film doesn't just immerse you, it locks you in and doesn't let go. From the sunlit beaches to the dark, menacing coves, the world of Extortion pulls you in, making you feel like you're right there in the thick of it. And that's what makes it work so well. Every location tells you something deeper about the characters and their fight to survive. Now, let's dig into the dialogue and script of Extortion, 2017, because this is where the characters come alive. It's not just about the action or the setting, it's about what the characters say and how they say it. Dialogue can either pull you into the story or yank you out, and Extortion does a pretty solid job of using words to elevate the stakes. Let's break it down, shall we? First off, the naturalness of the dialogue is key. This isn't a film where characters spout off witty one-liners or overly dramatic speeches. No, the dialogue here is built to feel like real, raw conversation. When Kevin talks to his wife, when he's trying to make decisions under pressure, you can almost feel the tension in every word. The back and forth between them, especially in the high-stress moments, is full of that tight, uneasy energy, like you're witnessing two people who are trying to hold it together, but the world is pushing them to the edge. Take the moments when Kevin is interacting with his son. The lines are simple, but they're loaded with emotional weight. You don't need fancy speeches or big dramatic statements to get the feeling that this man is desperate to keep his family safe. A few carefully placed words speak volumes. The weight of responsibility hangs in every exchange, Like when Kevin's trying to comfort his son or reassure him that everything will be okay. You don't just hear the words, you feel the pressure behind them. But the script also knows when to throw in that bit of sharpness, that little sting of realness in dialogue that makes you feel like you're eavesdropping on something personal. There are moments when the conversation isn't about what's being said, but how it's being said. Kevin, for example, is a man in distress, and his frustration shows in his exchanges with the locals. These aren't people trying to be polite. They're blunt, sometimes even harsh, but it's exactly what you'd expect from a situation where everyone is trying to survive. And then there's the way the script handles tension-building exchanges. When characters are up against the wall, when the stakes are so high that every word feels like a decision that could tilt the scale between life and death, the dialogue slows down, becomes measured, almost clipped. The pauses between words are as important as the words themselves. You can hear the characters thinking, calculating what they say next. These moments might not have big speeches, but the silence in the dialogue is just as loaded. Of course, there are those moments when the film allows for a little wit. Not too much, but just enough to keep things from getting too heavy. A few sardonic remarks from the characters who are just a little too jaded by their surroundings. These aren't full-on jokes, but more like sarcastic comments that give you a glimpse into the weariness of people who have been hardened by tough situations. It's not overdone though. The film doesn't veer into dark comedy, but those little bits of sharp dialogue keep things grounded. The impactful lines are few and far between, but they hit hard when they land. There's a moment early in the film when Kevin's trying to figure out how to get out of the mess he's in, and he mutters something under his breath that says more than an entire paragraph of exposition ever could. You don't need to hear a monologue to understand the gravity of the situation. Sometimes, it's the smallest remarks that make you realize how much is at stake. And here's the real magic of the script. Its ability to make you feel the emotional depth of the characters through their words. The moments where Kevin talks to his wife or son aren't just about exposition or setting up the next scene, they're about the raw feelings of a man who's trying to protect his family while crumbling under the weight of it all. The way he speaks to his son, protective but with a hint of fear, is incredibly relatable. It's this understated emotional punch that makes the dialogue resonate with you long after the scene is over. Even in the more intense confrontations where characters are at odds with each other, the script does a brilliant job of balancing tension with subtle, underlying emotion. The confrontations aren't just about physical danger, they're about the emotional stakes. The way the antagonists talk about Kevin or dismiss his struggles. It makes you realize that, for all the danger around him, Kevin is battling his own demons. The pressure of keeping his family together, the emotional toll of having to make impossible decisions. But don't expect the dialogue to spoon-feed you answers. There are ambiguities built into the exchanges, leaving room for interpretation. That's what makes some of the conversations stand out. They're layered. Characters say one thing, but you sense there's a deeper meaning lurking beneath the surface. It's the kind of dialogue that keeps you guessing about motivations and intentions. Is someone being honest? Or are they playing their cards close to the chest? That uncertainty hangs over every word. In the end, the dialogue in Extortion is like a finely crafted piece of music. At times it's soft, at other times it's sharp, but it always plays the right notes to pull you deeper into the emotional core of the story. It's the type of script that feels real, because the way people talk under pressure often isn't about grand speeches or fancy rhetoric. It's about what's left unsaid, the weight of the moments, and the way each character's words shape the narrative in subtle but powerful ways. And those tiny moments? They stick with you long after the credits roll. Extortion, 2017. It's a movie that wears its genre proudly on its sleeve, but with a few clever twists that might surprise you along the way. When you hear the words thriller and survival drama, you probably expect a certain formula. A tense situation, a battle against the elements, high-stakes action, and a lot of suspense. This movie certainly delivers those beats, but let's dive deeper and see how it plays with those genre conventions, or perhaps even subverts them, while managing to keep things fresh and engaging. At its core, Extortion is all about survival. You've got a man, a family, a seemingly idyllic location, and then bam, things go terribly wrong. That's pretty standard fare for the genre. The hero is pushed to his limits, faced with life or death decisions, and you watch as he tries to navigate through an increasingly hostile environment. If you've seen films like this before, you know what to expect. Action, desperation, and constant tension. But here's where the film starts to play with the genre. While it checks off all the usual boxes, dangerous island, hostile forces, high-stakes drama, the film doesn't just rely on cliches. No, it takes a more subtle approach to suspense. Rather than giving us all-out action scenes where explosions fly and characters make daring escapes, Extortion taps into a quieter kind of tension. It's more about the threat of danger, the looming possibility of failure, than it is about all-out chaos. Think of it as the film that thrives on making you feel like the danger is just out of sight, like you're always one wrong move away from disaster, even if you're not seeing bullets whiz by or buildings blow up. The pacing is deliberate too. It's not about getting from one action-packed scene to the next. It's about building tension, keeping the suspense simmering beneath the surface. There are moments when you think everything's calm, everything's safe, and then bam, the rug is pulled out from under you. This builds an undercurrent of suspense that's less about physical peril and more about the emotional and psychological toll the situation is taking on the characters. But here's where the movie introduces something a bit fresher: humanizing the villain. This isn't a straightforward good versus evil story. The antagonist isn't a mustache-twirling villain out for revenge. This is someone with their own motivations and reasons for what they're doing. The film doesn't just focus on Kevin's struggle to survive. It gives us a glimpse into the complicated morality of the people around him. This isn't a film where characters are clearly divided into good and bad guys. Instead, Extortion adds a layer of complexity by letting us see that the situation is more morally ambiguous than typical thrillers. You're left wondering, is anyone truly in the wrong here? That's an interesting twist for a film that could have easily fallen into the trap of simple action thriller tropes. The suspense here doesn't come from obvious set pieces either. It's more about small decisions. Should Kevin trust this person? What happens when he pushes his body to the limit? What if his family doesn't make it out of this? These aren't questions that come from action scenes or dramatic confrontations. They come from the characters' inner struggles, and that's what keeps you on the edge of your seat. The film doesn't rely on classic action thriller cliches like endless shootouts or over-the-top explosions. Instead, it creates suspense through psychological tension. The real drama is how Kevin deals with the emotional weight of the situation, how the circumstances chip away at his sanity, and how he balances his need to survive with his need to protect those he loves. And then there's the drama. This film knows when to pull back from the intensity of action and let you breathe. The drama isn't just about the immediate danger. It's about the toll this crisis takes on Kevin and his family. His relationships, his love for his wife and child, become as important to the plot as any external threat. There's a heavy emotional component that's interwoven with the suspense, and it's all about the character dynamics. How does a man who's out of his depth handle the responsibility of trying to save his loved ones? How far is he willing to go? These aren't questions of external action. These are the deep, quiet moments where the character's inner turmoil and decisions matter more than anything else. The humor, as you might expect from a survival drama, is minimal, but it's there when it's needed. Think of it as a lifeline amidst the tension. It's not slapstick or even comedic. It's more about the dry, sardonic remarks that punctuate the chaos. These moments of levity aren't there to undercut the tension, though. They're there to remind us that even in the direst situations, people still have to find some way to cope. Whether it's a sharp comment from Kevin or a quiet, weary chuckle from a secondary character, these moments allow the film to breathe, giving the audience a brief respite before plunging back into the deep end of suspense and danger. In terms of genre execution, Extortion walks a tightrope between the expected and the unexpected. It stays true to the core elements of survival thrillers. There's plenty of tension, a clear survival instinct driving the characters, and a constant sense that anything can happen. But it's the way the film handles the emotional stakes and the moral ambiguity that makes it stand out. It doesn't just give us explosions and chase scenes, it gives us characters who feel real, struggling in a world that is unforgiving and often unpredictable. It's a thriller that plays with the genre conventions, offering us something a little different from the typical action-packed fare. So, does it subvert the genre? In a way, yes, but it never forgets its roots. It brings in enough fresh ideas, especially in its handling of suspense and character drama, to keep things engaging. It balances all those elements, action, suspense, drama, and a hint of humor, to create a film that's as emotionally gripping as it is thrilling. It doesn't always follow the conventional path, but when it does, it knows exactly how to keep you hooked. Let's talk about the social and cultural commentary in Extortion, 2017, because it's not just about a family stuck in a life-or-death situation on a remote island. Oh no, the film uses this high-pressure, survival thriller setup to sneak in some bigger conversations about the world we live in. So, grab your mental map because we're about to navigate through some of the deeper, under-the-surface themes that Extortion tackles without ever shouting them in your face. Right off the bat, the movie subtly highlights class disparity. When Kevin and his family end up stranded in a place where locals hold the power, there's this feeling of powerlessness that the family faces. They're in a foreign environment trying to keep their lives intact, but they don't have the same resources or influence that the locals do. What do you do when you're in a situation where survival isn't just about skills, but also about who has the upper hand, whether it's money, connections, or knowledge of the land? This dynamic points to real-world issues like economic inequality, power imbalances, and how they shape the way people interact with each other. In a way, Kevin's fight for survival isn't just about escaping the island, it's about confronting a system where the odds are stacked against you before you even step into the game. On another level, the film also touches on trust and betrayal, especially when it comes to the reliance on others in a crisis. You think you can rely on people, but sometimes the lines between right and wrong get blurred and suddenly you're not sure who you can trust. This hits home in a world where misinformation spreads like wildfire, and it becomes increasingly difficult to know if the people you turn to for help have your best interests at heart or their own hidden agendas. It's an eerie parallel to the complex web of political distrust and manipulation we often see in contemporary society. At its core, the film asks, who do you trust when the stakes are highest? And how far can you go before your sense of morality starts to crumble? The survival thriller doesn't just deal with physical challenges but moral ones as well. Then there's the element of human nature under pressure. The film explores how crisis situations push people to their breaking points. It's a window into the primal instincts that come out when someone's life is on the line, but it also questions the lengths people will go to in order to protect themselves and their loved ones. How far will Kevin go to keep his family safe? What compromises is he willing to make? The film uses this question to subtly comment on the ethical compromises we make in the real world, whether it's in the workplace, politics, or even in our personal relationships. When push comes to shove, it asks us, what would we do in a world where survival comes at the expense of our ideals? But there's something even more subtle in the social commentary here, and it comes down to cultural dynamics, specifically the relationship between Western characters, Kevin and his family, and the locals. Kevin's struggle doesn't just stem from the physical dangers around him. It also comes from the fact that he's a stranger in a place where he doesn't have the knowledge, language, or resources to survive. This reflects the power imbalances often seen in global relations. How do we, as outsiders, enter and navigate situations where the rules are different, where others might feel that we've intruded upon their space or their lives? It's a delicate dance of cultural respect and misunderstanding, with Kevin and the locals constantly negotiating their boundaries. And that's a conversation that's super relevant in today's world, where globalization, tourism, and economic disparity often create tension between the haves and the have-nots. While the film doesn't hit you over the head with these cultural and political themes, they're woven into the fabric of the story in such a way that you can't help but think about them. It's not about offering direct commentary on real-world issues, but about using the narrative to spark deeper questions about our own world and the way we navigate power, trust, and survival. What's brilliant is how the film handles these topics naturally. The themes never feel forced or preachy. They're not shoehorned into the story to make some grand political point. Instead, they emerge from the characters' actions and decisions, from the world they inhabit, and from the stakes they face. Whether it's Kevin's confrontation with the locals or the ethical dilemmas he faces in trying to protect his family, these moments feel organic. Like this is just how life works when everything goes sideways. Of course, not all of the commentary is about big-picture topics. The movie also plays with the personal survival struggle, which taps into more intimate, relatable themes. It's not just about survival on an island. It's about the survival of human connections when everything else is falling apart. Kevin's relationship with his wife, for example, comes under immense pressure, and the way they navigate that emotional terrain says a lot about the way we rely on each other in tough times. That's a commentary on the importance of relationships, communication, and trust in any crisis, whether it's a literal life or death situation or just the daily struggles of modern life. The movie even touches on the idea of moral relativism. What's acceptable in one culture or situation might be unthinkable in another. The characters are all grappling with what they believe to be right and wrong, but their choices aren't always clear-cut. It's not a film where there are simple heroes and villains. Instead, it leaves us to wonder about the gray areas, the moments when survival trumps morality, or when desperation justifies actions that would normally be deemed unthinkable. All in all, Extortion isn't just a thriller. It's a thought-provoking film that uses its intense, survival-focused narrative as a vessel to comment on global dynamics, power, trust, and human nature. It doesn't scream its points at you. Instead, it lets the characters' decisions and the circumstances around them speak for themselves. It's a kind of commentary that feels both timeless and immediate, inviting you to reflect on how these universal struggles connect to the world outside the movie. And, if nothing else, it leaves you thinking about the costs of survival, and whether the choices we make to stay alive are ever truly black and white. Alright, let's talk about how Extortion, 2017, connects with its audience, and oh boy does it work its emotional magic in some unexpected ways. When you sit down to watch this movie, you're not just watching a couple of characters survive on a deserted island. You're getting pulled into an emotional whirlwind that'll make you feel everything from anxiety to compassion to even a bit of anger. And that's what makes the movie stand out. It's not just the suspense that keeps you hooked, it's the way it gets under your skin and makes you care about the characters and their fates. Let's start with the emotional tension. From the very first moments, Extortion sets up an atmosphere where danger is lurking just around the corner. You're constantly on edge, and the movie plays with that feeling throughout, letting the suspense ebb and flow in a way that almost forces you to stay locked in. That sense of unpredictability? It makes you sit a little straighter, doesn't it? And when you think the worst has happened, it just gets worse. That tension isn't just built on physical threats, it's built on the emotional stakes. You're sitting there, heart racing, thinking, okay, this character's been through so much already, what's going to happen next? That emotional investment? That's what keeps you hooked and makes you feel like you need to see what happens next. Now, let's talk about emotional reactions, and believe me, the film delivers those. For starters, when it comes to laughter, don't expect your typical laugh-out-loud moments. The humor here is subtle, often dry, and comes from the characters' sarcastic remarks or moments of bitter irony. You might chuckle when things are at their worst, but it's that kind of humor that reminds you that even in dire situations, people have a way of coping, sometimes through dark humor. These small moments of levity break the tension just enough to let you catch your breath, but don't expect it to be a comedy. Instead, it's the kind of humor that sneaks up on you and makes you think, yeah, that's how people handle extreme stress, isn't it? And then there are those moments that'll have you feeling your heart in your throat. When the stakes are at their highest, whether it's Kevin making impossible decisions to protect his family, or a surprising plot twist that puts everyone in even more danger, you will find yourself not just watching but feeling the weight of the situation. You might even catch yourself holding your breath during these scenes, feeling a surge of anxiety that feels as if you're living it with the characters. The film plays with your emotions like a finely tuned instrument. It invests you in the character's survival so deeply that when things go wrong, it feels personal. It's not just the characters who are on the line, you're on the line too. And then there's the shock factor. The movie loves to surprise you at just the right moments. You think you have the plot figured out and suddenly, a twist turns everything upside down. It's that unpredictable nature of the film that creates those shocking moments that leave you blinking in disbelief. Some of these twists might make you lean forward in your seat, eyes wide, with your heart racing, thinking, no way. And it's not just the what happens that shocks, it's the why. These surprises come from places you least expect, and that's what makes them even more powerful. The film pulls you in, gets you comfortable, and then hits you with something that feels completely out of left field. But it makes sense, and that's what gets you every time. But here's the big question. Does it stick with you after it's over? Oh, absolutely. The emotional resonance of this film goes beyond just a few moments of excitement or shock. There's a weight to the story that lingers long after the credits roll. You'll find yourself thinking about the characters, wondering about their decisions, and reflecting on the tough choices they had to make. It's that kind of thought-provoking material that keeps you coming back for more. You'll probably find yourself discussing the film with friends or family afterward, talking about the moral dilemmas and whether you would have done things differently. It's the kind of movie that gets you questioning yourself, asking, what would I have done in their shoes? And don't be surprised if Extortion has you coming back for a second look. As with many thrillers, once you know the big twists, you start noticing the little details you missed the first time around. The subtle clues that hinted at what was to come, or the emotional beats that hit even harder knowing the outcome. It's one of those films that's worth watching more than once, especially if you're into uncovering layers and digging deeper into character motivations. You'll pick up new insights, and some of those subtle emotional shifts will hit harder the second time. In short, Extortion isn't just a film that tries to grab your attention for 90 minutes. It's one that pulls you into its world, messes with your emotions, and leaves you thinking long after the credits have rolled. From gut-wrenching suspense to unexpected humor, from moments of shock to the slow burn of emotional development, the movie resonates with you because it makes you care. And that's something pretty special, considering it could have just been another typical thriller. Instead, it invites you to reflect, to feel, and to come back for more. So, yeah, this one stays with you. When you think about thrillers like Extortion, 2017, you might start comparing it to the typical survival films where characters are stuck in a life-or-death situation. You know, those movies where a group of people end up in some isolated, dangerous location, and it's a battle to the finish? Sounds familiar, right? But here's the thing. Extortion manages to carve out its own little spot in the genre by mixing up the usual formula and tweaking things just enough to make it stand out from the crowd. So let's break this down. If we're talking about survival thrillers, we can't ignore movies like The Shallows, Open Water, or even Cast Away. Those films have similar premises. People in a remote location trying to survive against the odds. But what sets Extortion apart is that it's not just about survival. It's about survival under pressure, where the threat isn't just the environment, but also the people around you. While a lot of survival films are about a character battling against nature, Extortion adds the human element of dangerous locals, betrayals, and the moral dilemmas that arise in such intense circumstances. So while other films may have characters just battling the sea or the wilderness, this one introduces another layer to the story. The danger isn't just physical, it's also about who can you trust when the world is falling apart. In a way, you could say Extortion is grittier and more grounded compared to some of those other survival thrillers. It doesn't have the glossy, action-packed flair of something like San Andreas or The Impossible. Instead, it's more focused on the psychological aspect of survival, how far you're willing to go to save your family when the people around you aren't necessarily playing by the same rules. The tension doesn't come from just surviving nature, but from navigating human relationships in an extreme and dangerous environment. And while it's not the first to explore this kind of human conflict, it does so in a way that feels real and raw without the Hollywood gloss. When we look at director Philippe Gagnon's filmography, Extortion doesn't really repeat what we've seen in his previous works, like The Sisterhood or Crossfire. In those films, there's a clear thriller vibe, but Extortion dials up the intensity by placing its focus not just on action, but also on personal relationships and survival ethics. It's almost like he decided to ditch the usual, let's blow things up, mentality and instead, zero in on human drama under extreme circumstances. And that shift works. The tension in Extortion builds through decisions, not just explosions or car chases. The real struggle here is figuring out who the real enemies are, and that psychological weight adds a unique element to the genre. Now let's talk about that newness. Does this film bring something fresh to the table? Absolutely. While there are a ton of survival films that follow the same beaten path, Extortion adds a bit of a twist by emphasizing the moral choices characters must make to survive. It doesn't just give you a simple, outwit the wilderness plot. Instead, it makes you question, what if the threat isn't just the natural world but the people you're surrounded by? That's a pretty unique psychological angle that most survival thrillers don't dive into so deeply. The film explores the cost of survival, not just the method, and it keeps you constantly questioning, what would I do in their shoes? And here's something else that makes Extortion stand apart. The visual style. While you might expect a typical survival film to be all about wide shots of beaches, cliffs, and waves crashing, Extortion keeps its camera tight, focusing on the emotional closeness of the characters. It's less about sweeping landscapes and more about the claustrophobic tension that builds when a family is under threat and you can't trust anyone around you. There's a personal, intimate feel to the way the film is shot, which keeps it from feeling like your typical big-budget disaster film, and makes it feel much more raw and grounded. But let's not forget the action. Sure, this isn't a non-stop action movie, but when the film does decide to throw you into a chaotic moment, it delivers. The action scenes are more about quick decisions and life-or-death stakes rather than prolonged, over-the-top battle sequences. It's more about the emotional impact of each moment as opposed to just spectacle. And that's what sets it apart from other action-heavy thrillers. It's the psychological drama that heightens every action sequence. When you compare Extortion to the broader survival genre, it's clear that this film doesn't follow the same path as a lot of its counterparts. Instead of relying heavily on formulaic plot devices, Extortion does a brilliant job of mixing the classic survival elements with a heavy dose of human emotion and moral ambiguity. It's like watching a character struggle with not just physical survival, but with surviving their own choices. It's not about just making it out alive, it's about how you survive, and that moral struggle is what sets it apart from similar films. So, in the grand world of survival thrillers, Extortion finds its own niche, offering more than just a fight against nature. It's a fight for ethics, trust, and family in a world that's suddenly turned upside down. It's not reinventing the wheel, but it definitely puts a spin on the genre, making it feel fresh and emotionally gripping. Extortion, 2017, is one of those films where you might think you're just watching a tense survival thriller, but then you realize there are some deeper, more subtle layers happening beneath the surface. You know, the kind of film that makes you think twice about a specific image or line of dialogue. It's almost like the movie's playing a game with you, and once you pick up on the symbolism, everything clicks into place in a way that makes the story feel even more rich and complex. First up, let's talk about water. In a survival thriller like this, you would expect water to simply be a basic survival element, something the characters need to find in order to stay alive. But in Extortion, water takes on a symbolic role. It's not just about hydration, it's about control and isolation. The ocean is vast and intimidating, and the characters' struggle to find fresh water becomes a constant reminder of their helplessness and vulnerability. But water also represents escape. It's the one thing that can take them away from the island, yet it's a resource so scarce and difficult to control. As the characters try to figure out how to survive, water becomes a metaphor for the elusive idea of freedom, how it's just out of reach, yet necessary for survival. The ocean might be a way off the island, but it also represents a trap. It's vast and wild, and much like the human decisions being made, it can drown you if you're not careful. Next, there's the concept of trust. Extortion constantly asks, who can you trust? This plays into the emotional survival that the film is exploring. Trust is the currency of this movie. Characters are thrown into a life or death situation, and you have to wonder, do they trust each other enough to make it out alive, or do they backstab to secure their own safety? Trust, in a way, becomes the true resource that the characters need to hoard or exchange in order to survive. But unlike water, trust can be easily broken, making it an even more dangerous and fragile thing. Just as the characters are fighting the environment, they're also fighting their relationships with each other. The collapse of trust is one of the most devastating things that can happen on this island, and it plays a central role in how the plot unravels. Speaking of survival, violence also emerges as a recurring motif. Not just physical violence, but emotional violence. You have the brutal physical attacks, sure, but you also have characters who hurt each other emotionally. The island is a pressure cooker that pushes people to their limits, and the film plays with the idea that sometimes the violence that takes place isn't just physical, but psychological. This emotional violence could be seen in the way characters manipulate each other, in the way moral lines are crossed, and in the betrayals that unfold. It's the violence that doesn't always leave a bruise, but it still hurts deeply and leaves scars. The moral grayness of survival makes it clear that sometimes, the worst injury is the one you can't see, the betrayal that happens behind closed doors. But let's not forget about the island itself. The location in Extortion is more than just a backdrop, it's a character in itself. The island is isolating both physically and emotionally. It's beautiful and tranquil, yet terrifying and cruel. And that duality in the island's character is reflected in the characters themselves. Just as the island can offer moments of peaceful beauty, it also holds secrets and danger beneath its surface. The island is a place that forces characters to confront not just nature but also the darker sides of themselves. The inhospitable landscape symbolizes the breakdown of civilization, how quickly everything can spiral out of control when the rules of society no longer apply. It's a reminder that survival isn't just about fighting against the elements, but also about fighting against your own instincts and your moral compass when push comes to shove. Now let's talk about power and authority. The idea of who holds the power in this survival scenario is constantly shifting throughout the film. It's almost like a game of chess, where characters move strategically, trying to hold on to power or take it away from others. Betrayal often happens when a character feels that their power is being threatened. The struggle for power in Extortion is subtle, but it's always in the background like a constant undercurrent. Power is both a physical and psychological force, and the film constantly questions who gets to make the life or death decisions when there's no clear authority. The shifting dynamics of control become one of the most fascinating elements, especially when you realize that sometimes, the most powerful person is the one who can manipulate everyone else without them realizing it. The film keeps you on your toes, constantly shifting the power balance until you can't even tell who's in charge anymore. And finally, there's the idea of survival versus humanity. The movie poses the question, at what cost does survival come? Is it worth becoming someone you're not just to make it out alive? This theme is explored through the characters' actions and decisions, moral compromises, hard choices, and questionable alliances. And it's the cost of survival that the film brings into stark focus, making you question, is survival worth losing your humanity? Can you still be a good person in the worst of circumstances, or do the situations make you something else entirely? Extortion isn't just a survival thriller, it's a study in what it means to be human when stripped down to the essentials. And the deeper layers, whether it's through the symbolism of water, the shifting dynamics of trust, or the emotional violence lurking beneath every decision, all help to add depth to the story. These motifs don't just sit there, they enhance the emotional and thematic weight of the film, making you think long after the final scene has played out. Each element adds its own layer of meaning, turning what could have been a straightforward thriller into something much more thought-provoking and engaging. When talking about Extortion, 2017, it's interesting to think about the context in which it fits. This movie isn't part of a larger franchise or series with a complicated mythology to tie it down. It's a standalone thriller, and that's what makes it intriguing, because there's no baggage of pre-existing storylines or expectations that come with, say, a Marvel movie or a multi-part saga. However, there's a historical context of its own that comes into play when you dig into the film's themes and its exploration of survival. At its core, Extortion belongs to the survival thriller genre, which has a rich history in cinema. It draws on the traditions of movies that deal with people in extreme, isolated situations, where the elements of nature, be it a harsh wilderness or in this case an island, become just as much a character as the people themselves. It's a genre that has evolved over time, and if you trace its lineage you'll find films like The Swiss Family Robinson, Castaway, The Grey, and even more modern takes like The Shallows. These movies tend to deal with the primal struggle between humans and their environment, testing their will to survive against all odds. What Extortion does is tap into that familiar survival trope but shifts the focus from the wilderness to the human relationships in play. The threat isn't just about nature, it's about the choices people make when survival is on the line. It draws on a long tradition of survival narratives but adds a more psychological and emotional layer, making the stakes feel more about trust and betrayal than just outlasting a storm or a predator. In that sense, it gives a modern spin to the genre, where the real danger comes from within, inside the characters themselves, not just the unforgiving world around them. It's as if the genre has evolved, moving from the straightforward battle against the environment to a more complex exploration of the human psyche under pressure. In terms of historical context, Extortion takes place in a present-day setting but deals with universal themes that have appeared in countless real-life survival stories. It's fascinating because the film touches on the idea of extreme moral dilemmas that often emerge in real-life survival situations, from being stranded in an isolated location to deciding what extreme measures one is willing to take to save oneself or a loved one. While the movie isn't directly based on a true story or specific historical event, it taps into these timeless survival instincts and the ethics of life and death decisions that can be found in real accounts of people stranded or caught in perilous situations. Now, looking at the historical genre, if you think about films that explore human survival under stress, Extortion has a unique connection to the psychological and emotional survival stories of real historical events. Films like Alive, 1993, based on the real-life story of a Uruguayan rugby team stranded in the Andes, or 127 Hours, 2010, about Aaron Ralston's struggle for survival, provide an accurate, sometimes gritty look at what happens when people are pushed to their limits. These films dive into psychological survival, a genre where characters aren't just surviving nature, they're surviving the emotional and moral toll that comes with being in such an intense situation. In Extortion, there's a tension between survival and morality that feels deeply rooted in the tradition of historical survival stories. The film asks, how much of your humanity are you willing to sacrifice to stay alive? This is a question many historical survival accounts grapple with, and the tension it creates in the film is what makes it so gripping. Whether it's the famous story of the Donner Party, where a group of pioneers were forced to resort to cannibalism to survive, or more recent tragedies, the real-life historical echoes of such events loom large in the background of the film's narrative. But here's the twist. The way Extortion takes this human drama and places it on a remote island, with the danger coming from both nature and human treachery, makes it feel both timeless and universal. The movie taps into that primal instinct to survive, but it also reflects the real-world consequences of those choices in a way that's both compelling and thought-provoking. The isolation of the island is a metaphor for the emotional isolation that comes with tough decisions, and it's one of the aspects that makes the story feel grounded in real human experience. In terms of historical accuracy, Extortion doesn't claim to tell a true story or mirror any specific events, but the reality of the situation feels true to life. The portrayal of the human experience of survival under duress, of battling not only the environment but your fellow man, is what gives the film its authenticity. The movie doesn't try to romanticize or exaggerate the story. Instead, it offers a raw and realistic look at what could happen when the rules of society are stripped away and people are left to their own devices. In a way, the film acts as a commentary on the potential for darkness in human nature when pushed to extremes, echoing historical survival situations where moral lines are blurred in the name of survival. The film stands as a contemporary take on themes that have existed throughout history: how people respond to danger, how relationships fracture under pressure, and how survival can sometimes cost you more than just your life. It doesn't need to be set in a specific historical context to feel real. Instead, it taps into the universal experience of survival and what happens when humanity is stripped down to its most basic instincts. Ultimately, while Extortion might not be part of a series or based on a historical event, it draws from the history of survival narratives and uses the psychological tension in those stories to create a film that feels just as compelling as any true survival account. It's a genre film with deeper layers of meaning that resonate with real-life themes of human nature and morality, all while keeping you on the edge of your seat. Extortion, 2017, is one of those films that might not immediately scream blockbuster in terms of budget or box office expectations, but it has a surprisingly interesting story when you dig into the financial side of things. The film, while not a high-budget Hollywood spectacle, is a classic example of a smaller-scale production that still manages to make an impact in its own way. It's a thriller that doesn't need massive special effects or extravagant set pieces to tell its story, and this is reflected in its budget. So, let's dive into how the budget and box office numbers really shape the experience of the film. To begin with, Extortion had a modest production budget compared to the high-octane thrillers or huge action-packed spectacles we see today. It wasn't a massive multi-million-dollar project like, say, a James Bond film, nor did it have the sprawling sets and visual effects of a Marvel movie. Instead, it used its budget wisely to create a tense and immersive atmosphere, focusing more on the human drama and psychological tension between the characters than on flashy explosions or over-the-top action sequences. The island setting, while important, didn't require an excessive amount of CGI or complicated special effects. Most of the budget went into location shooting and ensuring that the survival elements felt grounded and realistic. It was about creating that sense of authentic isolation, and the film does this effectively by using natural environments and minimalist production designs. This is where the budget really shines. The film looks good despite being produced on a relatively smaller scale. The performances, the tension, and the atmosphere, those were the key elements that the filmmakers prioritized, and they succeeded in making the most of their resources. It's a perfect example of how a film can feel high stakes and intense without needing a massive budget. The realism and grit of the movie came from its tight storytelling and efficient use of what was available, rather than relying on a flashy spectacle. This is a nod to filmmakers who know how to work within their financial constraints while still delivering a compelling experience. However, when it comes to box office performance, Extortion didn't exactly blow the doors off theaters. With a budget in the low to mid-range, in the realm of several $1 million, its box office take didn't necessarily reflect a massive return, especially when compared to Hollywood blockbusters. The film's release strategy was more niche, catering to a specific audience that enjoys thrillers with a psychological and emotional edge. It wasn't a global hit with widespread commercial appeal, but it did well enough to turn a profit in some international markets. The smaller scale of the film meant it didn't need to make hundreds of millions to be considered successful, but its modest earnings reflected the film's limited reach and the fact that it was never intended to be a mainstream mega-hit. Marketing, of course, plays a significant role in a film's commercial success, and in the case of Extortion, the film's marketing didn't seem to capture the attention of a massive global audience. The marketing efforts were aimed more at targeted audiences who are fans of survival thrillers and those who enjoy exploring psychological depth in such films. The movie was promoted primarily through traditional channels like posters and trailers, but didn't receive the kind of viral buzz or social media attention that could have boosted its box office numbers. As a result, it didn't generate the type of mainstream chatter that helps drive ticket sales in today's heavily social media-driven landscape. Audience reception also played a role in its financial trajectory. While Extortion received positive feedback from those who appreciate character-driven stories and psychological tension, it didn't necessarily capture the attention of the broader public. The movie has a cult following of sorts, with fans of intense, morally complex survival thrillers appreciating the film's emotional depth and the nuanced performances. However, it never broke through to the kind of general audience that propels movies into the stratosphere of blockbuster success. The audience who saw it were mostly those who enjoy gritty survival narratives and weren't necessarily looking for the next big tentpole franchise film. Looking at the financial success from a different angle, Extortion didn't set out to be a global phenomenon, and it didn't need to be. Its success is measured more by how well it executed its niche story and concept within its modest means. The film didn't have the kind of large-scale commercial push that often accompanies Hollywood blockbusters, but it still found an audience, especially with thriller enthusiasts and those who enjoy stories where the real threat is human nature rather than a faceless villain or supernatural force. It's a great example of how smaller films can be profitable without needing to take over the box office, focusing instead on quality storytelling within a focused budget. To wrap things up, Extortion didn't go down in history as a box office giant, but it didn't need to. It's one of those films that lives on thanks to its quality, tight production, and the way it taps into themes of human survival and morality. In terms of budget versus production quality, it's clear that the filmmakers worked with what they had, making smart decisions that prioritized storytelling over spectacle. And while its box office performance was modest, its financial success isn't measured in the millions. It's about the lasting impact it has on those who appreciate its gritty realism and psychological depth. If you're itching to dive into the suspense and survival drama of Extortion, 2017, you've got a few options to experience the film, though it won't be the kind of movie that's plastered across every major theater marquee. This isn't a blockbuster hit demanding you grab your popcorn and head to the nearest multiplex. No, Extortion lives comfortably in the realm of more intimate viewing experiences, where it can truly shine. First up, streaming. This is where you'll likely find the film at its easiest access point. For those who are cozy with their streaming platforms, Extortion is available on various services, depending on your region. Streaming services like Amazon Prime Video, Netflix, or other similar platforms often have such thrillers tucked in their libraries, so if you've got a subscription, a quick search could lead you right to it. One of the best parts of watching on a streaming platform is that you can control your environment. Pause the film for a snack break or let the tension build while you huddle on the edge of your couch, deeply absorbed in the action. Then there's the option of digital rental. If streaming isn't your thing or you'd prefer to watch the film on a specific platform like Google Play, YouTube Movies, or Apple TV, you can rent it for a small fee. This gives you the flexibility to watch it on your big screen TV, tablet, or laptop, but without needing a subscription service. Plus, you get to rent it for a specific time period so you don't have to commit to keeping a subscription active just to catch this film. It's an option that suits those who like to pay-per-view and enjoy a more flexible approach to their movie nights. Now, theaters, here's where it gets interesting. Extortion didn't quite make it to wide theater chains, which means you won't be finding it playing in your local multiplex. It had a much more limited release, perhaps in select theaters or film festivals, primarily focusing on markets where smaller thrillers are appreciated. If you're lucky enough to find it in a niche theater or playing as part of a special screening, this could be the best way to experience it. On the big screen, surrounded by an audience who shares the same appreciation for a gripping, intimate survival tale. But let's get real for a second. To truly appreciate the full impact of Extortion, it's all about creating the right viewing environment. The movie thrives on tension, emotion, and those moments where silence speaks louder than any dialogue. While watching it on a streaming service or renting it digitally will give you all the core experience, the best way to truly immerse yourself in the story is with a dark room, a big screen, if possible, and some quiet. The isolation of the island, the emotional stakes, and the gritty survival elements really pop when you get rid of distractions and allow yourself to feel the claustrophobia of the situation. It's a film that demands focus, and watching it in an undistracted, comfortable setting will bring out all the tension the filmmakers worked so hard to build. If you're watching from home, turn off your phone, grab some snacks, and don't rush it. This film is about feeling every moment, from the rising suspense to those heart-stopping decisions the characters make. And if you're in the mood to get a bit deeper into the material, watching it on a streaming service allows you to rewatch specific scenes or even share it with a friend to unpack the emotional complexity afterward. This isn't the kind of film that you just watch once and forget. It's one that you'll find yourself revisiting, and streaming makes that kind of rewatchability easier. At the end of the day, while Extortion might not be available in theaters everywhere, its streaming and digital rental availability make it easily accessible from the comfort of your own home. You'll just need to set the right mood and let the tension of the survival story really sink in. Whether you're watching alone, with a friend, or even over a movie night with a group who appreciates the psychological drama, the best way to experience it is simply to sit back, get immersed, and let the character's plight take you on a journey you won't soon forget.